So everybody fasten your seatbelts because we're gonna now travel back and go to Mecca. We are now in Mecca 1,400 years ago. It's a very, very tense night. They come storming, you know, the leader of Mecca, Amr ibn Hisham, who was one of the leader of the tribes of Mecca, came raging with some of the other leaders, and they storming to the house of Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr is the friend of Muhammad. They came storming to the house of Abu Bakr, boof, 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 in the middle of the night. What's going on? Asmah Bint Abu Bakr, the daughter of Abu Bakr, she opened the door and they shout on her, "Where is Muhammad? Where is Abu Bakr?" And she's like, "I don't know. Where are they? Where did they disappear?" And they searched the house and there was nobody in the house. They couldn't find anyone. There was only Asmah and Aisha, the sister of Asmah. She was a young girl. Asmah was in her 20s. She was pregnant. She was still there. And they were raging. They were fuming. They shout again on her, "What's going on? Where is Muhammad? Where is Abu Bakr?" Because they know if Muhammad disappears, he will be with his close friends, Abu Bakr. Where are they? "I don't know." She shout on them and they get angry. And Abu Jahl, Amr ibn Hisham, he took his hand, he slapped her in the face and her earring fell down. And they left raging and fuming. Why were they so raging and fuming? They wanted to get rid of him finally. This, for them, he was a troublemaker. He was insulting their idols. He was insulting their customs. He was trying to gather people against their authority. And for the first time, they actually agreed together to kill him. For the first time, after 10 years of having to endure, 12 years actually of having to endure him and endure his preaching, they decided to kill him. And they gathered 10 men. Because in that society, tribal law makes it that you cannot kill a man from another tribe. They will retaliate. So they come up with a plot. They got 10 men from each of the families of the tribe to go to Muhammad's house and kill him all together so that the family of Muhammad cannot retaliate and they will accept money as a compensation. So they gather those 10 men and they stand outside the house of Muhammad. And when the night fall, they all had their knives. They entered, they stormed into the house, and they saw somebody in the bed. They took the sheet out, and it was not Muhammad. It was his cousin Ali ibn Abi Talib, hiding instead of him. And that's why they went to Abu Jahl, and they were all fuming about it. Where were they? Where did they disappear? And Muhammad and Abu Bakr were actually escaping. They had plotted an escape from Mecca to go to Medina at their first Hijrah. Muhammad came that night, in the night as well. He came to the house of Abu Bakr. He knocked at the door very silently. "Abu Bakr, it's time to go. It's time to go." And Abu Bakr came, and they had already planned 2 camels. And they also planned a shepherd to come after them and the son of Abu Bakr to join them. And they knew everybody will follow them in the direction of Medina. So they took another direction. So Medina is in that direction. They took the other direction to go and hide. Why they had a shepherd with them? So that the shepherd can cover the tracks of their camels. And why they had the son with them? So that the son can bring the camels back. Very well thought plot. So Abu Bakr, it's time to go. They get the camels, they get the son, they get the plan. They wanted to go. Asmah came and she wanted to give them food. Asmah Bint Abu Bakr. She had carried food for them, but the food was so heavy she couldn't wrap it properly to give it to them. So Asmah took her belt, she tore it in 2 parts, she wrapped herself with half of it, and she wrapped the food with the second half. And from that day onwards, Asmah was called Dhatun Nitaqain, in honor of her role of helping Muhammad and Abu Bakr escape. Asmah Dhatun Nitaqain means the woman with the 2 belts, because she tore her belt in 2, using one for herself and one for the food of Abu Bakr and Muhammad. And so they run, and they went in the opposite direction of Medina, and they hide in Ghar Thawr. It's a cave little bit far from Medina in the opposite direction. And their plan was to wait there for 3 nights before they go to Medina, so that they can wait for all the Mecca people to finish their search. Mecca, of course, they were fuming, they were angry, where are they? So they decreed, they made a trophy, 100 camels for anyone who can find Muhammad and report on him. 100 camels is a fortune in back then, even it's a fortune in today's world. So what about that fortune back then? And everybody was searching for them, to the point where they were starting to look everywhere, trying every single corner. And there was a moment when Abu Bakr and Umar and Muhammad hiding in that cave, and they came so close to Quraysh people, the Mecca people, looking to them, so close that Abu Bakr held Muhammad and told him, "Oh Muhammad, if only they look down, they will find us." And Muhammad said, "Don't worry, trust, God is with us." You know, those moments when he said that, the Quran later reveals that Al-Sakina, he was filled with Al-Sakina. Al-Sakina means serenity. That moment of serenity when you really cannot do anything at all except to trust in a higher power. Imagine they are in a cave. They can go nowhere. They have nowhere to hide. If only they see them, they will kill them. There is nothing they can do. They cannot scream, they cannot shout, they cannot run. There is only one thing to do, is to trust that they will be protected. And that's where the Sakina came on Muhammad. And miraculously, Quraysh did not look at that cave and they escaped. Sorry, they left. The third night, a Bedouin guide came to the cave to take them to Medina. Of course, they didn't follow the normal path that everybody was looking on them on. They took a faraway path going through Jeddah, long road, so they can escape. And there were three people. There was the guide, Abu Bakr, and Muhammad on their camels, crossing through the desert for what will become one of the most monumental journey of all time, a journey that has changed history in the world. Three people going in those camels. And it was reported that Abu Bakr would be panicking. He would be like going in the front, going in the back, looking right, looking left as they were journeying through this desert, worried that somebody will be following them, worried that somebody will catch them. And Muhammad was keeping his Sakina spirit in his heart. He was not looking right, was not looking left. He was reciting the Quran as they were journeying through the desert. Now the Muslims before them, they had left before them. Around 80 men and more women, they were already the first Muslim who left Hijrah, they left Mecca to go to Medina. So Muhammad and Abu Bakr were really the latest ones who emigrated, together with Aisha, Asmah, and Ali. Everybody else was sent before. So they were all in Medina looking for them. Imagine the anticipation. They knew that Muhammad left, but they didn't know whether he will make it or not. And it's taking a while. And the Muslims of Medina, around 100 plus people, and the Ansar, the people of Medina who joined him, who pledged to support him, were all waiting. And every day they will go and they will climb on the trees, and they will look at the horizon from the morning until lunchtime, until Zuhur, to see whether they will see somebody coming in. And they will look and they will look and they will look. And one day, one of them observed that there is a small caravan, it's not caravan, small group coming from far. And that was, they recognized Muhammad and they shout, "The Prophet is here." And many of them were so curious, they've never seen him before. They wanted to know, who is this man who is calling himself the Prophet? Who is this man who had emigrated? Who is this man who had such an animosity with Quraysh? And they all gathered to look at him. And Muhammad and Abu Bakr, they entered. They stayed at the outskirts of Medina. They didn't go straight inside the city. They stayed at a place called Al-Quba, which is a bit, now it's inside the city of Medina, but at that time it was a bit out at the outskirts. They stayed there for 3 days to regroup with the Muslims as well, and also to wait for Ali and Asma and Aisha to join. And this is where they built the first mosque of the Muslims, Masjid Al-Quba. It's still until there today. Of course, it's renovated, was built there. When they were going into Medina, people were jumping around to try to have a glimpse of that man. Who was that man? And one person reported that when he saw Muhammad and he heard his first words, the first hadith that was recorded in the books from when Muhammad was entering Quba and Medina was a hadith. What would you imagine, somebody coming from the Hijrah saying? It wasn't saying like, hey man, gather up, hail the great emperor coming, or hail the leader of Medina coming. No, it wasn't also, hey everybody gather your arms, we need to fight back. No, the first hadith ever recorded was a hadith, it's called Hadithus Salam. I will read it in Arabic, it's part of the books. Afshu Salam, that was his words when he was entering. Afshu Salam, which means spread the peace. وَطْعِمُوا الطَّعَامِ وَصِلُوا الْأَرْحَامِ وَصَلُّوا وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامِ تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ بِسَلَامٍ, which means أَفْشُوا السَّلَامِ, spread the peace. أَطْعِمُوا الطَّعَامِ, give food to those who needs it. صِلُوا الْأَرْحَامِ, honor the ties of bonds between kinship and humans. Sallu wan nasu niyam, pray when people are sleeping. Tadkhulul jannata bisalam, you will enter paradise in peace. That was what he came with. That was the energy that he came with. And so they stayed in Quba. They waited a couple of days for Asmah to join, Ali to join. When they all gathered, they entered into Medina. And that was the beginning of a whole new era, the first era of a Muslim society when they gathered into Medina to start a society. And imagine they were leaving everything behind. It was an exciting journey of a start, but it was so tough. They had left everything behind them, their properties, their properties, their houses, their money, everything was behind them in Mecca, and they were starting from new with nothing, starting from scratch, following a spiritual rebel really in the desert out of nowhere, and all their survival was really at stake. And in those days it was so tough on them. The weather, even the weather of Medina was difficult for them. Medina is more humid, it has water, the temperature is is different. Mecca is more dry, so they started to get sick. They started to fall sick, all of them. And so much so that they were feeling they start to get all fevers. That was the beginning of the Muhajirun in Medina, all getting fevers, so much so that there was a moment when all the Muhajirun were falling sick and feverish. Aisha says one day she went to her father, Abu Bakr. She saw him sitting, like lying on his bed. He cannot even breathe and he's suffocating and sweating. Abu Bakr, what's going on? And he said, oh, Aisha, I am seeing death with my eyes. And she left. She went to another one, Bilal ibn Rabah, the freed slave of Mecca. He was also sitting and feverish. What's going on? And Bilal was, oh, I would give anything in the world to be back to Mecca, to have a sleep in Mecca one day. Even though he had nothing in Mecca, he was a poor guy, but that was everything he knew. I would give anything to be back. And then Bilal will sit down and he will curse, he will say, oh Abu Shayba, la'anak Allah for kicking us from Mecca. Oh Ibn Umayyah, God cursed you for kicking us from Mecca. They were angry, they were kicked out, they were truly fugitives and exiled from their own land. So much so that when Muhammad noticed that, Muhammad will sit down and he will start making his famous prayer. Allah ahbib lana al-Madina kama ahbabta ilayna Makkah aw ashad. Allahumma ahbib ilayna Madina kama ahbabta ilayna Makkah aw ashad. And he will repeat this over and over and over, which means, oh God, make us love Medina just as you made us love Makkah and even more. And he will repeat this prayer heartfully. Imagine the weight of responsibility of his shoulder, taking all these people with him, and they were all falling sick and their survival is at stake. And he was praying to God that he makes this new place to them a better place. And he tried to strengthen them. There was a moment when they were all feeling so weak, they would all go to the mosque and they couldn't even stand to pray. So they start, the Muhajirun, the immigrants, they start to go to the mosque and they would pray sitting because they were so tired to stand up and pray. There was a moment when almost all the Muhajirun were praying sitting in the mosque. And when Muhammad saw that, he said, you know, this prayer of a standing is worth double of the prayer of a sitting. He declared that praying standing is double, so that he can encourage them to put an effort and to stand up, because, you know, he knows that people heal not only from food or from medicine. People heal from spirit. They need to make the effort. And that gave motivation to the muhajirun to actually stand up. So when somebody is a little bit tired, they will feel like, let me push myself and stand up so I can get the double reward. And that's how he tried to encourage them so they can stand up and do their prayers. But there was also a rumor circulating in Medina at that time, a rumor that they were cursed, that they will not survive, because they were starting to have all the new baby borns were dying in their infancy. Infancy mortality at that time was very, very high. So they were all dying at that time, and there was like a rumor that they were cursed, and the Jewish at that time, they were circulating that rumors that the Muslim will not make it. And one day, guess who will bring the first baby to the Muslim community? It was Asmah, Bint Abu Bakr, who was in her 20s. She was pregnant when she was called Dhatul Nitaqain, when she was helping Muhammad and Abu Bakr in Mecca, when she was beaten on her face. She was a pregnant woman, and she migrated a little bit after. While they were in Medina, after they arrived, she gave birth to a baby boy. She was married, Asma, to Al Zubeyr ibn al-Awwam, one of the most famous Sahaba of Islam. He was a cousin of Muhammad as well, and a very famous Sahaba and a heroic figure in the story of Islam. And they get this baby boy, and they were so happy. And they went to Muhammad and they ran to him and they gave him the baby boy. And everybody of the Muslim community, imagine them standing. They carried this boy and they were screaming, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. They were happy. The curse is over. The spell is broken. And then Muhammad took a piece of date and he chewed the date and he put it in the mouth of that baby boy. And then he called him Abdallah. And then he gave the baby to Abu Bakr, and he asked Abu Bakr to read Quran in his ear. And that was the first baby born in Medina, a moment of jubilation, of celebration for the fragile community of Medina. And Abdallah Ibn El Zubeyr was born. And a few years later, when Abdallah was a little boy, when he became 7 years old, his father, Zubair, came to him. He's like, Abdallah, you're a grown-up boy now. You're almost a man. Come on. You go to Muhammad and you pledge allegiance to him. Give him al-bay'ah. Bay'ah. So Abdallah ibn Zubair, still a young child, he goes with his friend, the son of Ja'far. Imagine in the first little mosque, Muhammad sitting in the front with all the Sahaba around, and you have this little boy coming in, 7 years old. You know, his father told him he's a man, and he goes straight, passing all the Sahaba, arriving in front of the Prophet, and he's like, and everybody's like, what does he want? And Abdullah came to Prophet and he said, oh Muhammad, ana a'tik al-bay'ah, I pledge allegiance to you. And Muhammad was so happy, he smiled from ear to ear, and all the Sahaba laughed. The beautiful moment of how life was unfolding in Medina. And indeed, that man will grow up to play a big role in Islam later. He became a heroic figure, just like his father before him as well. He will fight so many more battles, and he will work under so many more khalifa, until 70 years later, 70 years after his birth, 70 years after all the ummah was saying Allahu Akbar in Medina for his birth, there was a power vacuum in the Muslim community. The Muslims at that time, 70 years later, they had already conquered Egypt and Damascus and Iraq and Yemen, and the whole Middle East has become under the Muslim. And at that moment, all the big Sahaba were dead. Muhammad was dead. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali were all dead. And also Muawiyah, who was the Khalifa of Damascus, was dead. And his son Yazid was dead. And even the grandsons of Muhammad, Hassan and Hussein, were dead. There was a vacuum. So Abdullah ibn Zubair, that little boy, declared himself the Khalifa. He felt that now it's his turn. He was the most senior person. And who can argue with that? He was the son of Asmah Nitaqain, the grandson of Abu Bakr himself, a famous Sahabi, the son of Zuhair ibn al-Awwam, related to the Prophet. So when all of these big Sahaba went, and he was also a very pious man, he was a prayerful man at night all the time. So he declared himself Khalifa of the Muslims. And everybody pledged allegiance to him. Egypt gave him the allegiance. Medina gave him the allegiance. Iraq gave him the allegiance. Al-Hijaz, all the Yemen also gave him the allegiance, except for Damascus. Damascus they could not, because they were all loyal to the Umayyad dynasty, to Bani Umayyah. So then we'll install like one of the big wars now between the Muslims. The Umayyad Khalifa took over Marwan ibn al-Hakam after the death of Yazid. He took over and he wanted to gain back his control. So they sent a big army. They took over Egypt. Then they took over Iraq. Then they took over Medina. And then who was left cornered? Abdallah Ibn El Zubeyr in Mecca, alone, fighting with his fighters, sticking to his right of the Khilafah. And the battle was very strong, and he was besieged for many, many months, but they couldn't do anything. And the army of the Khalifa at that time, Marwan, was much stronger, and he started to feel weak. They even put a cannon, al-Manjaniq, and they bombed Mecca to try to weaken them. So much so that the Kaaba itself took fire and was destroyed. So imagine now this community, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, stuck in Medina. The Kaaba itself was destroyed. People was besieged, and he started to weaken. And his companions start to feel they cannot take it anymore. And the resolve start to weaken. And he knew that he could not make it. He knew that he will lose. So they offered him a truce. They said, you have three choices. You can go anywhere you want. We will leave you. You just give up the fight. You say you accept who is the Khalifa and you go. We will let you go in peace. Or you go to Damascus as a prisoner, or you fight until you die. Now Abdullah, guess who he went to? It was still his mother, Asmah, Bint Abu Bakr, was still alive. She was in her 90s at that point. Abdullah goes to his mother, she was in Mecca. And he sat down with her and he said, Mom, they are offering me anything I wish, if only I give up. What shall I do? And Asma looked at him and she said, Abdullah, so what were you fighting for? Were you fighting for your dunya, or were you fighting for the akhirah? What did all these people who were with you die for? Why? So if your companions now get weak, do you give up? Is that what you will do? Oh Abdullah, how long will you stay alive in this world? How much more you'll be alive? No, dying is better for you than to survive and to betray your cause. If you think you are right, fight till the end. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr listened to his mother and he said, yes, but Mom, I'm afraid they will mutilate me after if they kill me. And imagine Asma talking to his son, her own son, imagining him dying, imagining him to be mutilated. And she will tell him, Abdullah, the animals, they don't get pain when they are mutilated after they are slaughtered. So tawakkal and go. And Abdullah will take his hand, the hand of his mother, he will kiss her, and he will go, and he will put on the last fight. And indeed, few days later, he was killed. And few days later, they will chop his head and they will crucify him in the middle of Mecca. And the Muslims from Damascus who were coming there, when they killed him and they took control of Mecca, they also started Allahu Akbar. They were happy that they won. And what an irony that the same boy who 70 years earlier was the celebration of the Muslims when he was born, he was also the celebration of some Muslims when he was dead. They crucify him for 3 days to give an example to everyone that whoever opposes the authority, that's what's going to happen to them. After 3 days, they finally gave permission to Asma, his mother, to go and to bury him. Asma will go, she will pick up the body, she will wash it, she will bury him. And few days later, Asmah will die. Asmah was the last of the Muhajirin alive. These first 100 to 120 people who left with Muhammad at the very, very beginning, she was the last one alive. And when she died, it was almost like a whole journey, like almost like a whole generation died with her, the generation of the Hijrah, the generation of those people who left. That's how, and then Asmah died. Now back to Medina. At that time in Medina, they couldn't even imagine that 70 years later they would be actually conquering the whole Middle East. At that time, they couldn't even see that all of these things will happen. They were just occupied with their own survival, with their own, just to get by. So of course they couldn't see all of that coming. And they were occupied and they were trying to create their own society. So they were building their first mosque. The energy was still an energy of jubilation. The baby born was born. They were starting to get stronger. They were gathering. They were creating their own society. And they started to build their first mosque, Al Masjid Al Nabawi in Medina. And they started to all help each other in like a communal work, building it from very simple stuff, so much different from the mosques we have today, with bricks, with sand, with clay, with the tree trunks, with palm trunks, they put the roof from the palm trunks. The structure was from palm, some of it from the dam. The floor was from sand and from gravel. And they will all sit together and they build. And Muhammad will come and he will join them in the manual labor. So much so that even Hamza one day came to Muhammad and said, Muhammad, stop, go get some rest. Come on, you have so much on your shoulder. We can do that. And Muhammad will say, no, let me do that. And to encourage themselves, they will sing a song. They will sing the famous song that still survives to this day. They will sing, Allahumma la hayata illa hayat al-akhirah. Allahumma irham al-ansara wal-muhajira. La hayata illa hayat al-akhirah. Allahumma irham al-ansar wal-muhajira. No life but the afterlife. Oh God, have mercy on the Ansar and the Muhajir. And Muhammad will sing with them all together, getting these bricks, getting these things, and building that first house, that first mosque that was ever built. And that's really how this whole society, this whole community started. And after they get this first mosque and they started to do these congregational prayers, they realized like everybody was praying and they know when the praying time was, but they don't have a way to get people on time. So people were coming in different times. So they wanted a way to call for prayers. And one day Muhammad called everyone, called the Sahaba. Hey guys, come here. We need a way to call people for prayers. What can we do? And they started thinking out loud all together, brainstorming. And one of them said, why don't we use a bell? Let's use a bell and we can call people for prayer. Everybody's like, no, a bell is like the Christians. We don't want to do that. We want to be special. And Muhammad said, yes, let's not do the bell. And another one came and is like, let's do the horn. The horn is a good idea. Everybody will hear the horn. And then people will say, no, the horn, we don't want that. It's also like the Jewish. And another one came and he said, let's do a drum. A drum is great. Nobody's doing the drum. Let's take that. And he was like, no, the drum, there's something not peaceful in a drum voice. And they couldn't find an answer. And they let it there. And that night, one of the Sahaba had a dream. He had a dream that he heard the voice of the Azhan done by the human voice. So the next morning he came rushing to Muhammad. Muhammad, I saw a vision, I saw a dream. He said, what? I saw the Azhan being called with the human voice. And Muhammad liked that. He said, that's it. Good one. Let's do that. And that's how the first Azhan called. And then Muhammad called Bilal to give the first Azhan because he had the loudest and the most beautiful voice. So Muhammad called Bilal, give the first Adhan. And now imagine with me this whole community gathering. They still have almost nothing, just like a small brick place of a mosque. And Bilal stands on the roof of the mosque. Bilal was a slave in Mecca. He was a black slave in Mecca, owned by a master who used to torture him. And he was so tortured, Bilal, that, it's reported in history how much he was to be taken to the desert and stay in the middle of the heat, and they will put a rock on his chest and they will keep beating him up because he was daring to follow Muhammad, because he was daring to believe in something different. But then grace came to his life when Abu Bakr bought him and freed him. And since that moment, Bilal, of course, he gave all his life to Muhammad, because Muhammad had given him his life back. So Bilal, imagine that man who was a slave, he now became a companion of the Prophet who had given everything for Muhammad. He stands up on the roof of that mosque in Medina for the first time ever, and he makes the first call that has ever been made. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And by Allahu Akbar, it means Allah is bigger than all this hardship that we're going through, is bigger than this poverty that we're going through, is bigger than Quraysh and their money, is bigger than everything we're going through. It's a call of defiance that, you know what? The God is greater than everything we're going through. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. It's a defiance to all the gods. Today we take it for granted because there's only one God worshipped in most of the lands. But at that time, to go and say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah is almost like saying a defiance to everybody around them, to all the tribes, and they were only like a bunch of people. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. I pledge allegiance to Muhammad, this spiritual rebel who was guiding them. He was not victorious at the time. There was no guarantee he will win. And then he will make the famous call, Hayya ala salat, come, calling people, come to prayer. Hayya ala al-falah. Falah means the good deed, the reward, the victory. So it's not only calling people to prayer, it's calling people to work, calling people to the good deed, to do stuff, to the striving, because they had so much work to do for that community to survive. They knew they had so much work to do. And that was the call for prayer. Hayya, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. That was not a call for prayer, made on a monastery in like a beautiful mountain overlooking the valleys with like incense burning and candles and beautiful meditation music, and somebody just had a nice green juice or salad and they were sitting in peace and they were calling for the prayer. No, that was a prayer of the call for prayer for the community of fugitives, of exiles, of rebels who had nothing, who were screaming their heart out in the middle of the desert, Allahu Akbar, calling for people to come and to help their cause, calling for people to come and to do the prayer and to gather together. That was the energy, that was the voice. How well put, coming from a voice of a freed slave. So you have this energy of someone who is truly liberated, who is calling for that liberation. That was truly the voice, the soul of Muhammad that was being shouted out in this middle of this desert at that moment. What were they fighting for? What is that thing that they were calling for? Hayya ala salat. What is this world that they wanted to build? A hint will come to us when we remember the first days of the da'wah, when Muhammad was still starting. When Muhammad first received his message, when he was not yet brave enough to take it to all the world, he only shared it with his family. He gathered his family, the Bani Abdul Muttalib, and he told them, "O Bani Abdul Muttalib, I have a message for you that is the best of this world and the best of the hereafter." The message of surrender, the message of Islam, Muhammad put it as, I'm going to give you something that is the best that you can employ in this world for this dunya, but also the best of this akhirah. That was what they're trying to achieve in a world of cruelty, of slavery, in a world of injustice. That was what they were after. That was what they were trying to create. That was what they were calling people to join. And that was the first call for prayer. And you know what the miracle is? The miracle is this voice, this call for prayer has never stopped one moment since that day when Bilal shouted out in the desert. It has never stopped. And it kept on growing and reverberating and echoing more and more and more. It started with one mosque, it started with one man, and then 2 mosques, and then 5, and then 10, and now we have thousands, and all across the world, this call is still being made. If you listen a little bit, if you wait a little bit, depending where we are, you will hear it. It's going to come back. It's incredible. When we hear this call, it's not the call of the local mosque. It's not the call of the local imam. It's not the DVD. It's not the CD playing. If we hear this call, this is the echo of the call that Bilal and the early community of Muslim, this is the voice of the soul of the Muhammad in the desert. That was the call that is still reverberating in the world today. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry. This is not this reality. The call is there. I live in Indonesia, which is far from Medina, completely different place. And I will wait a little bit and the call will come. And I will sleep and I will wake up and the call will come. And it's continuing to come. That's the reality of the world. We are all born under the spell of this call. We don't know what it means. Sometimes we know, we don't know. We don't know how to respond to it. We may respond to it. We may understand it. We may not understand it. We may ignore it. We may be angry over it. Some people, like, they bother them because it makes them awake. Some people, they love it. Some people, they respond to it out of duty because they think if they don't, they will be punished. Some people respond to it from their heart. It doesn't matter. But the truth, the reality is it's still here. That call has not stopped. And it's still reverberating. No matter what we do with it, it's here and it's here to stay. It won't end up anytime soon before something happens. Before this promise, before that thing that they were all after, the best of this world and the best of their after is fulfilled, that call will remain to be playing. And so and now this call has come to us. We were all born under its spell, even without knowing. We were all born and it was around us. And we were told stories about it, and we don't know what to do with it. But now it has come to us. We are the heirs, the inheritors of this legacy, of this heritage. And so much has been said about it. So much have happened since that moment. Millions, thousands of books were written. Thousands of imams have come. Thousands of leaders. Tens of mazhab were created. So many different interpretations of Islam have come. So many battles, so many wars, so many people have felt the peace, so many martyrs. So much has happened since that moment that took place. And now that story comes to us. But at the heart of it all, if you remove all of those things that have happened, at the heart of it all is a story of one man. The story of a man called Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib. Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, who will one day become known Muhammad Rasulullah. And that's the story that we want to travel to and to discover together. Welcome everybody to the Sira of Prophet Muhammad. Thank you.